No other state has seen as much proposed legislation as we have in Texas. Joining us to discuss the potential impact is Landon Richie, the public policy expert for the Transgender Education Network of Texas. Landon, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So, Landon, we want to talk to you. What's your overall reaction to the quantity of proposals, which suggests a lot of energy from lawmakers on the transgender community, even though they make up less than half of 1% of the population?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There is an outsized focus on an already very marginalized, very vulnerable community, especially in Texas. But we have also seen this trend over the last 10 plus years. Session after session, there is an increase in anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And every session, there is an increase in the number of bills and the proportion of those bills that target trans and gender expansive Texans especially. And so while 205 and over 200 plus bills targeting our community is alarming, it's also not unexpected for what we have seen over the past few years.
And let's break down one in particular. This session, how would the gender identity fraud bill impact the transgender community in Texas?
Yeah, so this bill is receiving a lot of media attention. And we want folks to understand that not every bill that is proposed has an equal chance of becoming law. There are various stops in the process and a lot of interpersonal relationships under the dome inside the Capitol that impact how far a bill actually goes. And so while this one and others are similarly situated are very alarming and people should be alarmed about them, the reality is a lot of these bills are legislators trying to make names for themselves and using the trans community to get their name in the headlines, to have a piece of legislation with their name behind it, right? And so that's what we're seeing with a lot of these bills. This one in particular, the very fact of criminalizing somebody's existence would have detrimental impacts on, like you mentioned already, and it is worth emphasizing, a very marginalized community who, like any other Texan, just wants to exist as ourselves in public and private life with access to the same resources, the same safety, the same protections, and the same opportunities and ability to be who we are in the state that we call home.
And you brought up a point that over the years, various bills have made a lot of noise, but yet ultimately failed. Let's talk about 2017. The so-called bathroom bill failed,
right.
But it seems like the momentum has shifted since then. In your view, why is that?
In Texas with SB 6, there was a large pushback from companies and businesses and the economic sector, and ultimately that helped to kill that bill. And we are seeing it again, like you said. But this is on the heels of the attacks on trans athletes and making it more acceptable in the public view to treat trans people as a second class, as not a population that should be included with other sectors of the population, namely cis people, and especially in sports. And so we have a more willing populace, and the legislature is aware of that and aware of the success that they've had with framing harming the trans community in the way of sports, to then bring it back and apply to bathrooms, which we also knew was going to come around. They were using sports just as it was never about kids, it was never about sports, it was about relegating trans and gender expansive people to positions of second-class citizenship.
So right now, that being said, what are you going to do on your end to respond? And what's your advice to the transgender community here in Texas? And what should they expect in practical terms from this very noisy legislative session?
In terms of, the session as a whole, being trans or queer, gender expansive in Texas, what's going to be really important now especially, but also after the session when we see what bills passed and which bills are being sent to the governor's desk, is to tap into support organizations like TENT, like Equality Texas, like other legal organizations that are going to be on the front lines challenging a lot of these bills if they do pass and become law, because they are, frankly, discriminatory and targeted towards a particular community. They can try to legislate us out of existence, which they are trying to, but we will exist in spite and despite that, and have always existed up, even up against, worse odds and more difficult times. Our elders, we look to them and we know that when they were our age, when they were younger, the political climate was not dissimilar from this. And there were even fewer legal protections or recognitions for our community then. And so we are seeing a resurgence of those attacks of wanting to strip people of our livelihoods. But we know that another world is possible, and we will create that and see that for ourselves.
Well, this has certainly been a legislative sessions we have watched closely, and we will continue to watch. Landon, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave us a comment below to let us know your thoughts on this video. And don't forget, you can watch full episodes of Austin Insight for free in the PBS app.